Over the past few years, we've really seen content creation become a industry in and of itself. We have individuals creating content that's getting more views than any traditional media form. These young individuals are getting hundreds of millions of views for a fraction of the cost, getting better outreach, and being able to sell products to generate revenue that even some startups would be jealous of having these revenue numbers. One of the issues, though, when it comes to content creation is that these individuals are really focused on developing their content. You wouldn't expect a singer to design their own t shirt, but due to the fact that this industry was a lot smaller and is still growing and developing, a lot of these individuals selling merch had some negative connotation. These individuals would sell t shirts that were scratchy, low quality, and really looked or gave a bad idea of really trying to sell out for a buck. However, just like every other industry, as the industry grew, organizations came along that allowed these individuals to focus on really getting their mission and vision created, while individuals or the organizations take control over the creative process when it comes to developing merch. Today we connect with Nikita, the founder, one of the co-founders of Juniper, and really go over how he was able to start this business 5 years ago and be able to develop products for some of the largest content creators out there. What's very interesting about our conversation is one, how he got into this industry 5 years ago before there was really a huge market like there is now. So the creation story is very interesting and unique and really inspiring to really view an industry you find that there is a business need for in developing a product. And as the industry grows, so does your business. But really also looking at the challenges, he saw that there was really a lack of quality goods and being able to take out the complexity of it, really focus on getting a content creator's product from ideation onto their consumer or their viewer shelves. So really where the Juniper business takes over the process. Hopefully you guys enjoy this episode. Learn a bit more about really how the content creation industry works and how you can develop a business from the ground up. But most importantly, how you can also develop a business without really ever having to raise money. One of the unique things about the story today is how they're able to go from a really small organization, generate revenue relatively quickly, and be able to grow their business to really help some of these seven-figure creators make quality products all around the world. Hopefully, you guys enjoy this episode. Please subscribe and take a look at Juniper and some of the cool content creators they work with today.
Juniper is the premium end-to-end merchandising solution for the creator economy. We focus heavily on identifying the products that have the perfect product market fit with the brands that we work with, these brands being mostly in the creator space. And we work backwards to figure out how to make these items and launch them to their millions of fans. We started the company about 5, 6 years ago and have grown to about 50, a team of 50, and we've generated a little over $100 million in Canadian revenue over the past 5 years as well. So it's kind of where we're at today, and we have a lot of exciting plans for the future.
And obviously, the creator economy became very huge over the past few years, and it seems to be slowing down by no means. When you were starting out the business, was the intentions for it to be like for creators, or are we looking more on the B2B side and then creators was an untapped market? Like, how'd you come up with the idea? Like, now looking back, it makes sense. Like YouTube, TikTok, all these creators, millions of dollars, Twitch. But I feel like 5 years ago, it wasn't as popular of a market, especially for a business to be created in this field.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that all the time, to be honest, how we had no idea that the creator economy would turn into what it is today. And it sort of makes me feel like, yeah, well, if I do start businesses in the future, I do have to have that kind of eye for it well in advance. We got super lucky because my brother was a creator himself. So about 5, 6 years ago, when we started the company, it honestly just started with me helping him explore the industry a bit. He had about 10,000 subscribers at the time. So nothing to laugh at, but like very, very small still
Mhm.
in the grand scheme of things. And he was kind of taking a poke around, and one of the things he looked at and had interest in was physical product. Like, how does he get his brand into physical product? And what we saw in the space was just crap, to be honest, right? Like print on demand, which funny enough is kind of the new tech, so to speak, in it, but not a good way to capture, capture brand and just transition it to the physical world. So we kind of launched the whole thing from there and grew it from there. But very lucky to have him as sort of the early wave of creators on the platform.
And starting out, I mean, probably not many, like you said, most of the people creating merchandise was that thing was, hey, I'm just gonna print a bunch of shirts, very basic, not much to it, just because sponsorship can be hard to come by, creating revenue is hard to come by. But also, I think we'll talk about this a bit, is that content creators or the creator economy, like everyone has their own skill set, and creating merch, creating product is not that simple. There is a process, there's supply chain, a lot of these issues that kind of come with it. When you were starting out, was it pretty inbound focused? Like were creators looking for ways to merchandise, or was it a quick email and then people were like, oh wait, I can make more money, let me learn more? Or how did that initially start? Was it quite organic to start off?
Um, we we did start off with obviously referrals through
Mhm,
my brother and his small network of
mhm,
friends that he had made in the YouTube space. So it felt semi-organic from that perspective. But yeah, it turned into outbound pretty quickly after that. So us, there's a narrative that we had to kind of change in the space and are still trying to push forward. Where again, these creators are used to um, associating a negative context to the word merch, or sorry, a negative connotation to the word
yeah.
merch, where again, it feels like the crap that you would buy at a concert, let's say, or
Mhm,
something. And so we have kind of double the work to do in terms of selling the opportunity, but also saying like, there's a different way to think about it here
mhm.
overall, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I know what you're saying. Like having, I guess, similar generation, kind of really focused. Most of the content I get is through YouTube or through other social media platforms. The idea of people like, oh, selling merch is most of the time seen as like, oh, not selling out, but like, okay, you're just gonna sell me a shirt for $80, and that's all it's gonna be. But due to your company and just people understanding that they can get more creative than just having a T-shirt with a face or a word on it, the merch has got more exciting and more, I can be more successful business. And your business is a shining example of how that's grown. When you were starting out, obviously merch can, like, now it's everything. Like you can, like, there's keychains, there's bobbleheads, there's all these other content. I mean, depending on what you consider merch now, things are getting a little more digital. Love it or hate it as well. When you were starting out, were you pretty focused on capturing like the t-shirt segment, the plush? Like, was there a segment you were focusing on, or was it quite broad, just trying to figure out logistics more when you started the business early in the days?
Yeah, we very much wanted to be kind of the anti merch company, so
Mhm,
to speak. And even actually, we have a new website coming out soon where the main slogan that we use on it is merch is dead. Um, so we very much are anti that, and from day one have tried to position ourselves in our messaging in that way, and have that be shown through our product assortments and selection. So we can, of course, create apparel, and we can create fantastic apparel. But what we honed in on, actually, kind of our Amazon books, so to speak,
mhm.
was plush toys. Funny enough, and still to this day, the over 50% of our product sales come through plush toys. Funny enough, they, I don't know exactly what it is. My assumption is that a plush toy can actually be a physical representation of IP, a character, the creator themselves, etc. And it's an opportunity for the fan to take a piece of that home with them, basically. But we very much kind of made our splash in the space with those products first, and then of course expanded our selection to basically include anything we want now at this time. We're very sort of brand or vertical agnostic.
Mhm.
We can
Hmm.
kind of create whatever is necessary for that specific creator.
And I guess Juniper is how did you come up with the name? Because I feel like that's quite a unique name for it. It's not like Brandy or like Merch R Us. I mean, there's Juniper is a little bit more unique. How did that name come to be?
Yeah, I mean, the big story behind that I won't fully bore you with, but yeah, we actually started off as two separate companies. I had a company called Imprint that I
Mhm,
think was more associated with that idea of sort of imprinting your
mhm,
brand on stuff. And there was Joel and Ryan, as we had mentioned
mhm,
before, started this company called Juniper. The the juniper tree, from our understanding, is sort of one of the fastest growing ferns, so to speak, and we've kind of based the logo. I think the logo came first before the name, even, where
mm,
the tree is representative of that fast growth. You kind of have a J as part of it, and the tree actually is in the shape of a YouTube play button, kind of stacked on top of
Interesting.
each other.
Hmm.
So I would almost say that that came first, and then Juniper kind of came second, associated with it.
I mean, that's pretty cool. It makes a lot of sense. Unique name, and like I was saying before, I've trimmed a lot of junipers, work a lot of junipers doing in my bonsai days as well, which is really random fact and funny, and I love juniper tea and everything else. So enjoy the name. Besides how the story you sold, but also just the plant represents. So you're starting a business developing these products. One thing that I guess will come to mind is that a lot of, maybe this could be a misconception, like a lot of these content creators, either one, are not that interested in like developing a supply chain, learning how to develop merch. Like a lot of them they're just a content creator. What is there a big education portion of it, or is it more of the fact that during the early days, or I guess now, the content creators would come to you and say, "Hey, I want to build some merch. Figure out something for me." Or kind of how's the relationship formed? Is it a lot more on educating the creator, or is the creator coming to you with like an idea that you're going to have to manage and mold into a business?
Yeah, it's so different on a creator to creator basis. Yeah, I think folks are familiar with the idea that they can go and, if they really wanted to, put the pieces of the puzzle together
Mhm.
themselves. So they're familiar probably with Alibaba, with Amazon FBA,
Mhm.
and they're like, yeah, like I could probably go and make some of this stuff happen to some degree. um, what we kind of come in and sell to them is like, listen, don't like don't stress about all that stuff, because there's actually a lot more to it than you even think.
Yeah.
And yeah, like we'll be able to do it to make all of us way more
Mhm.
money and to do it way faster as well. But yeah, like some creators already actually even have existing businesses that they've tried to run
Mhm.
themselves. In fact, I think that's become more and more common, and is more and more of interest to creators to kind of manage part of that themselves. And so we're structuring part of our deals around that as well. But yeah, you kind of get a mixed bag depending on what they started with.
And I really do think like creation and developing a supply chain extremely difficult, especially now with COVID, or at least, I mean, in Ontario, COVID's still a thing, but still with the impact of COVID. I mean, that's I would say that was recent. That's almost 2 years ago when that occurred with the not creation of COVID, when COVID was occurring and everything was freezing, the supply chains were freezing, shipping was freezing. How did you get through that? Because I feel like that would be a big part of your business that may be challenging to especially develop those supply chains and kind of work with manufacturers.
Well, COVID was created, wasn't it, in a lab? um, we were very fortunate to have kind of front loaded all of that supply chain building work prior
Mhm.
to COVID. So my partner and I had lived in China actually for a few months back
Mhm.
in 2015. I had been there several times sort of between then and 2020
Mhm.
when COVID occurred. So we already thankfully started planting the seeds then, and had the partnerships and our own full-time employees
Mhm.
working in China beforehand, such that they could continue growing themselves. Honestly, yeah, if timelines were a bit different and we, were maybe off by a year or two, could have been a very different story about how
Mhm.
we would be able to set up a powerful supply chain, because we only are able to do what we do as effectively as we can because we have 20 to 30 boots on the ground
Mhm.
connecting with these manufacturers in an effective way.
And that's huge. I know I've spoken to a few others who develop goods within China, and having boots on the ground is the key. Like it's so, let alone developing merch, developing a supply chain network, knowing who the good suppliers are, developing products with timelines. That's a whole beast on its own. That's why a lot of large multi-billion-dollar organization outsource that, because it is no simple task for an individual just to be like, oh, I'm just gonna call a factory in China, get some mock-ups and see if we what we can build. So that's great that you kind of were. I mean, you thought it through and really started developing the supply chain first for you to ability to develop the products at the speed you do.
Yeah, no, just to
Mhm.
pile on that, like there are so many levels, or there can be so many levels of middlemen between the manufacturer and
Mhm,
the purchaser, so to speak.
mhm,
And you have no idea who you're talking to unless you're kind of there.
mhm,
So you have no idea if you're getting the best price or just, yeah, being kind of screwed with.
mhm,
But also, even like what a factory is defined as, or there are so many definitions for a
mhm,
factory too. So I think we all kind of assume whenever we think a factory, like a Foxconn like factory,
mhm,
right? You sort of have, you know, hundreds of people there putting like little parts together on this assembly line. It feels very kind of professional in that sense. We went to visit a factory, so to speak, and saw four women sitting at a table sewing plush toys, and that was the factory.
oh
So
wow.
it's and so you never have a sense of scale, professionalism,
Mhm.
etc., unless you really go there, and yeah, that's just so important to get right.
That I think that's what interesting with everything. I think one thing people take for granted, especially with like tech, if you've like, growing up in this day and age, you assume everything is the same. Like, oh hey, like I Google a factory, I can see their photos. Oh, it should be easy. I buy everything online. Like, I think that is one of the factors people find it challenging, especially startups or entrepreneurs, is being able to get the understanding, feet on the ground, understand what's going on. I think is such a big benefit, but also fixes so many headaches down the road. And I think that's one of the things that with outsourcing, a lot of entrepreneurs may mess up or mix. They assume, oh, hey, I hired someone else to figure this out. I trust them. But like everyone always says in entrepreneurship or starting a business, like you can't trust others to watch your business as much as you trust your own business or you'd watch out for it because you're much more invested than they are, even if you're paying them. So that's
100%.
great perspective, like you said, with like what is a factory? Like that may sound simple, like oh yeah, like a big factory, they're gonna have machinery to build stuff, and then you realize it's like oh, it's five people. That's not what I interpreted. And if you're like, hey, I need 100,000 units, you just can't get those out of thin air. So speaking of factories as well as those, like you said plushies were kind of your quite popular, still popular to this day. When you look to develop new products or different like product lines, does it come from the creators kind of asking for it or pushing you towards that direction? Or do you look at kind of what's, hate this word, like trending or not viral, but I guess trending in the market and say, hey, this is a SKU we could develop that should have success? Or kind of how does SKU creation come to you? Is it through the creator avenue or is it through you looking for business opportunities that you think would work well for the creator economy?
Yeah, great question. So, first, just to kind of touch on trends, we will partake in trends when it
Mhm,
makes sense, but we don't like trends that much, to be honest. As
mhm.
silly as that might sound, given that we do live in a trend-based kind of
Yeah.
world now. But like the thing with trends is that they come and go. So maybe you can get a pretty quick, big splash on something. Like, the one example of something we caught on to early was the fidget spinner craze like
Mhm,
4 or 5 years ago. So yeah, like we made decent, returns
mhm,
during that time, but you're not investing into a SKU that will stick around and that you
mhm,
can scale across your creator, so to speak. So in general, we try not to look at it in that way. We look, as you kind of said, at what is great additional incremental revenue we can generate for our creators from the brands that they have.
mhm.
So, for example, one of our creators, Inquisitor Master, she plays this game called Roblox and has a
Mhm,
very sort of like um, kid friendly content. And so a lot
mhm.
of the products we initially made for her were, yeah, kind of like soft goods, plush oriented, maybe, onesies, apparel, etc. But she actually has this other part of her audience that are sort of kind of these teenage women,
Mhm.
that we are now able to tap into by launching a nail polish line later this year.
Oh wow.
Totally kind of on the flip side
Mhm,
of things. So it's so like brand oriented and what makes sense for that particular market. But it's very rare for creators to actually come to us with those ideas, because I think they just don't even think it's possible,
mhm,
often, right? Like again, there's just that belief of like, well, I have merch and cool, I have some premium merch maybe with Juniper so far, but um, there's no way for me to launch a nail polish line if I
mhm.
wanted to, and there very much is because these guys are generating millions per year in
Yeah.
revenue.
And so for that example, would you have went to them and say, "Hey, we can develop a nail polish on. We think based on your market segmentation, this is a good product to fit the need. Is that kind of how the relationship or new product was created?
Exactly. Yeah,
Oh,
totally.
interesting.
And of course we have to kind of consider capabilities or existing
Mhm,
partnerships we have at this time. So we started to talk actually with some nail polish manufacturers leading up to having that conversation
mhm,
with the creator. So we felt confident enough to say, hey, I think we can spin something up within 2022. But actually, like in theory and fundamentally, it shouldn't matter, right? Like
mhm,
we don't view ourselves as manufacturers
mhm,
per se. Like we have networks of manufacturers that we connect to. We're product building engine, basically,
mhm.
that can attach to whatever manufacturing partner we need to get products made for our creators.
That's super interesting. I think one of the I guess misconceptions or kind of thing that's really interesting is the fact that how you described your business is that you're developing products for the creators. It's not so much like, hey, we're just like you said, not just creating merch. You're saying, hey, based on your market, based on not I guess not trends, but based on creation of materials or physical goods that bring value. You're like, hey, this is a product SKU that could do well for X market, and we have these creators in that market where we could bring the product towards. I think that's much more complex, but also like you said, much more value added service that you're bringing to the creators you work with, which is kind of interesting because there's so many different things now. Now, I bet you get asked this a lot, or maybe you don't. Very popular right now is the whole digital assets, NFTs, creating digital things. How do you navigate that conversation? Have you? I'm assuming you've looked into it, but that's a little bit of a different, I guess, avenue. Kind of how did has that affected your business at all, or is one of those things where it's not as common as maybe just the hype seems online with the whole NFT craze?
Yeah, well, there's, I mean, two things here. So there's the launching of the digital assets on behalf of creators, and then there's just even working with NFT projects, which we are starting to do
Oh,
as a company
interesting.
too,
Hmm.
separately. But that's to create physical goods for them, right? Um, I think we saw a huge splash of creators launching NFTs. Um, Actually, like at some point last year. I think Logan
Hmm.
Paul made the big launch early on, and he was
Hmm.
sort of the first creator on the scene to do so. And then you saw a bunch of others doing it. But I've actually seen very much a dwindling of creators asking for it. I think
Hmm.
there's a lot of skepticism still around
Hmm.
NFTs and what it means overall for them. And actually, I think the market becomes skeptical as well whenever a creator is attached to an NFT as well at times.
Yeah.
So, I definitely believe in certainly the technology long
Hmm.
term. And I think creators will play a huge role
Hmm.
in leveraging blockchain technology. So yeah, I think right now we've sort of seen it, maybe not even peak yet, but
Hmm.
we've seen the current version of the
Hmm.
technology in its current form, and we've seen some creators take advantage of it. I'm more excited about what will happen 2, 3 years from now.
Hmm. And like you said with trends, like trying to develop something that's a little bit long term because the tech behind developing it. And I think, like you said, very skeptical anytime, let alone people disliking merch. Disliking NFT launched from a creator can be, I mean, we've seen it for some other these big creators, is a little bit of a slippery slope sometimes, but it's like you said, it's gonna be interesting over the next few years to see how that goes. But really focusing on kind of what you do best is creating these physical goods is quite interesting for sure. And how I guess right now when you're developing these new goods, you're kind of looking for new business. Has it got to the point now where it's just primarily inbound? Like, has it been very much word of mouth, or have you seen a shift? For example, maybe you start on YouTube now, it's like Twitch content creators, TikTok, or do you find that it's I don't know if this is the proper term, like social media agnostic. Like it doesn't matter where you come from, everyone kind of wants the same thing. Or have you found like, hey, YouTube creators tend to go in this direction, Twitch in this direction, TikTok in this direction? Have you seen a big shift between the platform in regards to what type of content they or type of product they want created?
So, type of product per se, no. I don't see too, big of differences between platforms. I definitely see major differences in terms of the folks that we want to work with in the creator
Interesting.
economy. So, YouTube is by far still our number one
Mhm.
platform. And I think it has a lot to do with just even the creation of a brand and what it means to have a brand. So you can't measure the effectiveness of a brand and its ability to sell based purely on the number of hits their
Mhm.
videos get. A lot of I mean, that's what TikTok has kind of shown us, is that you have these TikTok creators generating crazy, crazy viewership, but it's over, 10-second
Mhm.
clips. And so you never really get, or you rarely get an opportunity to connect directly with
Mhm.
the person behind the brand, so to speak, and to actually feel almost like the type of loyalty that is required for you to spend money on them. So we
Interesting.
focus a ton of our attention still on YouTube. TikTok is definitely something we can't ignore,
Mhm.
but Twitch has been a struggle for us. We've worked with a couple of the top Twitch creators and have seen, not the type of results that one would expect from working at the top of the market there.
I would just assume, I mean, it makes sense why TikTok may not be as powerful just because less trust is developed like YouTube, and I would even assume Twitch is great because if you watch someone for 100 hours, you tend just to, I mean, in a weird parasocial relationship, but like you tend just to feel like you're friends with them. You know them so well. You stare at anyone for 100 hours, like that's creepy amount of time. But like you said, there's like a huge level of trust. I'm not actually surprised at Twitch just because some people, I mean, you're streaming 40 hours, 50 hours a week. You think there would still be that same level of trust, but it could also just be that the viewers or how the content's created. But that's a little bit of a surprising tidbit that I would have just assumed that Twitch would be number one just because you're just watching someone live their life to some extent or play a game. But it's quite
Very much
interesting.
not. No, yeah. Like I think like you are spending maybe a lot of time on Twitch, but think about the content you're viewing, right?
Hmm.
Like I know Twitch isn't all games, but often on what dominates Twitch is certainly gamers, right? You're
Hmm.
watching them play games, and so okay, well, you start to think like, well, what is the brand behind this, right? And is there a powerful enough brand? And you then start looking at, well, honestly, the difference between a creator that shows his or her face
Hmm.
in video or on streams versus not is huge, right? Like we won't work with anyone or even consider working with someone that doesn't show their face, for
Interesting.
semi-obvious reasons, maybe, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's we we're still learning, to be
Hmm.
honest. Like we have fairly good equations to
Hmm.
determine the we call it like the merchandisability of a
Hmm.
creator, but we've we still continue to work with creators that we believe will sell millions per year, and
Hmm.
sometimes they'll sell 5 figures per year.
Hmm.
So it's a constantly evolving equation for us.
And I think that is such an interesting thing. I mean, we've seen the movement, I think, even towards like the whole micro influencer marketing. Like the idea that trust based marketing is like the new, I don't know if it's a new thing, but it's more popular now just because you have content creators that are primarily focused in like one segment or have that viewership of that perfect target. If you're a truck channel, trucking company goes to you, everyone who's watching you understands the product that you really can't get on TV just because it's so broad. So I think that we've seen that shift, especially. But I guess on the reverse side, you're saying sometimes big content creators may not have the draw or the fan loyalty that's expected. What kind of makes someone more, I guess, in your opinion, like more successful? Some may have a smaller view count or smaller subscribe count, but could still outsell some larger content creators. What do you find, like, obviously showing their face, having good content, but like, is there some key factors that may not be super obvious that may allow for greater merchant merchandising that may not be expected? Merchantability, I don't know what word I'm trying to use, but you know what I'm trying
We
to get
say
to.
merchandisability, but
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's correct, right? Yeah, I mean, some of the obvious ones are like, is there is there an audience there that's large
Mhm.
enough? But like the one of the key metrics we look at is engagement. So,
Mhm.
how are they engaging with the brand on not just kind of the primary social
Mhm.
media, so let's say YouTube, but
Mhm.
is there a community of folks on, like, is there a Discord channel? Discord has
Yeah.
actually become a cool new way to kind of
Yeah.
assess community,
Mhm.
recently for us, where previously you would kind of maybe go to Instagram
Mhm.
or Twit or sorry,
Mhm.
oh, what am I saying?
Twitter?
Twitter. Yes, thank
Mhm.
you. Um, and would kind of see like, is there activity
Mhm.
there? But now it's Discord. Now we look at like, oh, they have 50,000 people on Discord. Great,
Mhm.
like that's an amazing community.
Yeah.
So it's the presence of things like that. It's things like strong intellectual property too.
Hmm.
Really helps a creator do well. And then there's just an X factor, and it's you almost can't even describe what that X factor is, but yeah, it's the difference between someone that, as you said, like let's say a trucker YouTuber
Mhm.
that is able to sell hundreds of thousands of dollars of product versus one that isn't. They might have the
Mhm.
exact same metrics. You just feel something when you watch them,
Mhm.
and you don't really know how to put it into words, but you feel something, and we have to kind of put our scouting glasses on, so
Mhm.
to speak, anytime we watch YouTube
Mhm.
channels.
And I think it's similar to like the VC world in some extent, where like you have two businesses, same ARR, same thing, but you're like the founders. I just like there's something about them. I just trust them more. And I mean, that's the
Mhm.
same thing with content creation, where there's some people you're just like, they're a star and you don't know why, but they have that it factor, which is it's so funny how that's still a term and still used, but today is still very true. Where there's some people that are just better, and you're like, I don't know why, they're just more engaging, more draw like, everything they do is the same as someone else, but they're just a little bit better, and it's kinda interesting how you brought it up, as well as even, everyone in every industry, there's that special factor that can make you more successful, and it's hard to write an essay or do, like, a project on why that is. Um,
Totally.
but one I guess, I mean, that's pretty unique that I mean, Discord's a funny thing is that Discord has been pretty much newer to me over the past few years. I mean, a little bit with gaming back in the day, but now the companies I've even interviewed on the podcast or work with, they have their Discord and they're like, "Hey, for help, join our Discord, look in our Discord." And now I'm seeing all these newer brands or newest companies using Discord to like build that community, and it's been so unique. And like you said, for like brand loyalty, it's next level. And some of these small companies having like 20,000, 30,000, and that's where they get most of their sales from. Over time, someone they're like, yeah, I don't use Instagram anymore. Some YouTube, but like I get all my sales through Discord because we have an active community of Discords and meetups. And that's like you said, like a new platform that is really shaping the brand or at least the likability of a product or an idea. Do you, I guess one question is, do you, when you're developing product, you're working with a creator, does it ever come up like helping? Do they have to come to you with a brand identity, or do you ever help them figure it out, or kind of how's that go? Trying to develop kind of what is their product that kind of would sell it, like you know what I mean?
Totally, yeah. Yeah, I think similar answer as before. It sort of varies. So
Hmm.
some of them come in with a very strong brand identity already
Hmm.
set, and yeah, we can kind of plug into that and take it to
Hmm.
the moon. But yeah, we're very proud to, with a couple of our actually largest revenue generators today, to have played a key role in developing their brand for them. One of our
Interesting.
creators we actually took from, yeah, like 100 grand a year to they did 9 million this past year
Oh
in
wow.
revenue, which is crazy. And yeah, we were kind of a core part of developing
Hmm.
their IP, their characters. So we never play a role in content, so to speak,
Hmm.
ever. But I think we've have a very good eye after 5-6 years of doing
Hmm.
this of what does the audience get attached to, and what is it about your brand that people really love, and how do we sometimes characterize that, so to speak.
Hmm. I mean, that's that just the amount of volume is so surprising. You think for like an individual or a small group to sell that much is mind blowing. I mean, I think we've seen it today with the shift from traditional media to more of this content creation. Do you, I guess, do you see that like being a bigger shift and continuing, like more content marketing, brand development being through that creator economy rather than the typical, hey, we're gonna, because it's February, buy a Super Bowl ad? Do you see a lot more people kind of moving towards being individuals developing their own brand and content rather than, I mean, the I guess famous thing is like Mr. Beast making his own chocolate bar instead of sponsoring another chocolate bar. Like, do you see that being a bigger shift over the next few years, that these content creators will become bigger brands in themselves and kind of no longer, I guess, as much require getting branding deals from other brands?
Yeah, I absolutely see this, and it's exciting that we're kind of in the back half of
Hmm.
this evolution where indeed companies kind of started by just paying for creators to kind of
Hmm.
promote their brand. you then kind of moved into the second wave of the evolution where they kind of did now like deeper collaborations with each
Mhm,
other, so to speak. And now we're moving into a world where creators are like owning their own brands
mhm,
fully. And I think it makes a ton of sense. Like the marketing power is absolutely there. The connection to the audience is there. They have everything that they need from that perspective. Now,
mhm,
if anything, they just need to plug a supply chain into the back end
mhm.
to make it all work. So I think it's great. And yeah, we're Mr. Beast is definitely leading the way with that. But we're just around the corner from seeing, I think, a lot more of these happen.
And I mean, I think we even see the transition with different generations paying attention, kind of focusing on it, realizing that these YouTube and streaming stars are first making like seven figures a year. So it's not just oh, this is a fun hobby. They're making more money than some businesses at this point, which is surprising and shocking, but I think gets the knowledge. And I mean, we've seen like entrepreneurial websites talking about it as well. One thing that's always interesting, but even with like for kind of jumping around a little bit is with your past. So, you've had entrepreneurship, had a few startups in the past, and kind of gone through all those journeys to where you are today. Is there anything within the whole startup mentality or things you hear that you feel is a little bit untrue or incorrect or easier than people think? That's another question, a little bit on the spot. I tend to get different answers, but is there anything you found easier that people think is harder or more difficult than it may actually be from all your experiences creating and running startups?
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you're saying people would assume before they started a startup that this one thing would be terribly difficult, but
Yeah.
actually it's a little bit easier than
Mhm.
expected.
Yeah.
Um,
Like one example that always comes up, or this is a little bit similar, is one thing I've talked to a few people is that the whole idea of like the grinding mentality. They're like you never need to sleep. It's 34 hours a day. And you talk to pretty successful people and they're like, hey, sleep's kind of important over the long term. Like some days are sleepless, but you kind of need your rest and like managing a life. And so a lot of people they tend to say like, hey, like health is important. And I think that is maybe I guess that's a little bit different question, but like health is something you should take into consideration early on if you want longevity or raising. Some people say raising funding is a lot simpler. Some say it's more challenging. I guess it's depending on the industry, but it's really a mix, I think, is what's seen on funny enough social media versus the real life tends to be quite a dramatic shift from actually being in it day to day.
yeah, I mean, a quick note on that. Like, I had a good conversation, and then I'll answer your question
Mhm,
separately. I had a good conversation with a friend of mine a year or two ago, and he's very well connected in the space, and
mhm,
he asked me that exactly. He's like, "Hey, like with Unikit, I noticed that you seem to work hard, but you're not killing yourself on a day to day basis.
mhm,
Whereas I look at my other friend over here, who's like, you know, gained 30 pounds in the last year, has
mhm,
like stressed up the wazoo and
mhm,
like can't seem to figure it out. And I think what we landed on is that it's incredibly challenging, but like when it's right, it still clicks in,
mhm,
and
mm,
you're working for something that actually where you will see meaningful progress on it. Like
mm,
if you are bashing your head against a wall a million times over and you've done this for like years now, you probably it's not a question of did you work hard enough? You
yeah.
clearly have. It's a question of do you have the right product market fit? And so
Mm,
it's worth altering that. So I definitely think it's difficult, but it shouldn't kill you, so to speak, which is maybe how it's commonly shown or talked
mhm,
about. The to answer your question
mhm,
in my way, so yeah, I mean, we definitely run a bit of a different business
mhm,
than many, but what we've been very proud of is being profit driven since day one. So
mm,
we haven't had to raise a single cent,
mhm,
and I think that's been kind of easier than I expected, and that's how we continue to even as we move into kind of new
mhm,
business lines now we still think about that. Like, how do we generate revenue and make this profitable as quickly as possible?
mhm,
And it's given us just so much breathing room and control of our company to do so.
mhm,
So,
mm,
and that was a big surprise going into this. I assumed that the only way to build a company was to raise money. And literally everybody told me that, even my close mentors that knew what I
mhm,
was working on and knew me very well.
mhm,
But I think there is very much a different way. And I think instead of us thinking about how do I show the metrics such that I can raise money. I
Mhm,
think what would make it even easier to raise money, and I can't speak from
mhm,
experience quite yet, is to show how quickly you're able to get to profitability.
mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's actually a great point. I think that's one thing that's shocking to most people. I think one of the issues is that, like, if you're trying to be $1 trillion business, you kind of have to grow at such a pace where you need cash. Like, to go from zero to $1 billion in 1 year, it is impossible just to sell something. I think one of the challenges through social media is people expect, like, oh, I'm starting a business. How can this become a unicorn in under 2 years? And the problem with one, very difficult. But two is most very successful people you'll talk to or have businesses. It's like, oh, yeah, no, this has been like a slow grind, but like owning 100% of $100 million business is a lot more money in your pocket than like 0.01% of a, I don't know if this math adds up, like $1 billion business. Yes, probably correct. Yeah. So like I think that's one of the things as well is I think, and I like how you touched on that. Like, you don't need to. I think one of the things everyone always hypes up raising because it sounds cool. To be like, oh, I just got $1 million. I have an idea in seed. I got 2 million in seed. But I've talked to many startups who are like, well, I got $2 million, but now I have a investors that I have to report to. So I'm not really an entrepreneur. I mean, I'm still running my own startup, but I'm kind of working for other people now. And I think, like you said, a lot of glorification goes into the idea of like raising money for the sake of just raising to compete with friends rather than being like, why do I need the money? And everyone you speak to, if you can show profit and you want to raise, it's 10 times easier. I think social media might have ruined it a little bit where like Facebook, Uber are all like, no profit, but we're $100 billion valuation. I think kind of skewed the idea. But every time I talk to a VC or someone, they're like, if you can show us how we're going to make money, it's so much easier to get investment as well because they're like, oh, if we give you X, we'll get Y. So yeah, no, I think that's a great point. It makes a lot of sense. And I think it's more common. I don't think everyone raises, but I think it's not as sexier in the news to be like company raises no money and is worth hundreds of millions. It's tends to be a little more newsworthy to be like 14-year-old child gets $10 million in seed fund to start the next like Facebook, where you're like, well, that's not how most billionaires or multi millionaires are really making their money these days. So I think that's a great
Yeah.
point.
No, I mean, I get it. It's a splash of money in one go, which is why it's newsworthy in that sense. But yeah, it's quite silly that it has been glorified in that way. Like, what you're effectively saying is like, I sold part of my company. I gave up some of my company to someone
Mhm,
else, and I have actually less control of it now, and I have no and less control of my own future
mhm,
here. So no, we're quite also kind of, I mean, I say that we might raise
mhm.
eventually, but
Yeah.
we're quite anti-raising because of everything that comes with that mentality. And it's funny too. Like, I remember when we were, not even just when we were first starting out, like even a couple of years ago when we were starting to generate some pretty serious
Mhm,
revenue, we were applying to work at different co-working spaces here in
mhm.
Toronto. And one of the prerequisites that a couple of these had was that we needed to have raised money to be a
Really?
part of their co-working space. And we're like, but like, we've generated millions already. Like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? So it is, the glorification is super interesting. Yeah.
That's super funny. I think it's like I think that's like almost a similar issue when like to some startups now where it's like, hey, like we have the money, we can afford it ourselves. Like, why do you need this? And I guess it's the same thing. It's super easy just to say, hey, there's a number here, but like I said, most you talk to most entrepreneurs, it's like super interesting. I think like one of the other misconceptions, like you have to invent something, like you have to invent a technology or invent something where most businesses are a improvement on a process, making a process easier, or just like taking what's already existing and having a slight improvement. I think that's also one thing that is taken for granted or again like over glorified as like inventing something when most ideas are an iteration or a process change on something that's currently being done but better for consumers or better for profitability or clear lines to revenue. But yeah, no, it's super interesting, especially with, like you say, having such a tremendous growth and in an industry also that is growing, which is super exciting, which is always good to see. It's like being in, I guess, kind of speaking of NFTs, if you're like in NFT space, like or a crypto space, like 5 years ago, you're like, I'm a genius. This is great. But like, I think or the creator economy is something that is just as big, or is just as big, and going to continue growing for at least, I mean, for the foreseeable future. We see a lot of the news getting a little bit nervous with podcasts, hosts, and other content creators kind of controlling the masses, getting more viewership than a TV channel, which is always funny when how we spoke on Mr. Beast getting 50 million on on of views where no TV channel gets that in a day. Like no other network can get the same amount of eyes, and I think that's something that you can't deny. Like people always talk down, like, "Oh, you're just a YouTuber," but attention is attention, no matter where you get it. And I think that is something people and markets and private firms are starting to see more and more. But yeah, no, super interesting story. And I guess before we hop off, any last wise words, anything else? And if you want to follow around the journey, like, what's the best place to kind of what's the website to visit and kind of where do you post most of your content to follow along in the great success you've had over the past few years?